Today we're doing a MIS TLIF on a patient with L4-5 spondylolisthesis and stenosis. And the key thing I want to show you here is this very large facet joint. And I'd like to show you how I use the sharp cob to release all the tendons from this facet joint so that the retractor will go down and rest right on the surgical target site without a lot of soft tissue creep. To do that, I use the cob elevator to strip all the multifidus tendons off the facet joint so that it's totally clear. And once it's clear, I should be able to use my finger and roll around the entire facet joint. I call that the San Francisco Twirl. I should be able to feel the rise of the spinous process with my fingernail. And when I can get my finger all the way around and I can feel the rise of the spinous process, I can just drop a single dilator and all the tissues will just move out of the way. And that way, I don't have a lot of soft tissue creep. The other important thing about this particular case is that with this very large overgrown facet joint, it's really hard to rest the retractor at the surgical target site, which really should be at the lamina. So after I release all the tendons, I will take a bullnose rongeur and I will bring it down through the skin and just by palpation feel that big bump, and I will use the bullnose rongeur to just morcellize what I call the cap of the overgrown facet joint to flatten all this out. I will not pull the pieces out because that often leads to a lot of bleeding. I'll just leave it in there. I'll pack it and then I'll remove the little pieces once the retractor's down. But that will allow the retractor to sit much more flush to the lamina and prevent soft tissue creep. This is how I make and plan my incisions. Whether I use navigation or C-arm, it's the same thing. The first thing I do is I find the clinical midline by palpating the spinous processes. It's usually in this crease too, but not everybody has a crease. And some people's spinous processes are a little bit harder to feel than others, but you can generally get a sense of where the midline is, and I draw that line really, really, really long all the way. Then I use the navigation dilator after I verify that it's working accurately. I love that little beep. And right at that midline, I want to look at the lateral x-ray, that's the right lower hand image, and I want a trajectory that goes directly in line with the disc space, just like that. Not like this, not like that, not like this. Perfectly in line. When I have that line, I just put a little hatch here and I draw a very, very long perpendicular line to the midline. And that's how I key everything off. After that, everything is 2 fingers, about 4 centimeters wide. So there's a little bit of adjustments depending on what level and how fat the patient is. But I go 2 finger breaths, that's going to usually be about 4 centimeters. And I make another really, really long line. And then the length of the incision, top to bottom, is 2 fingers. Again, about 35 to 40 millimeters. I have the 2 incisions marked out. And I just make the skin incision and the fascial incision all in one fell swoop. Because this is a deep incision, it's hard to use the bovie. And the best way to control the bleeding is just simply tamponading this little opening. It's really hard to use the navigation. So I want to basically fit 2 fingers in there because that's the size of the rod sleeves. I want to blunt dissect through the longissimus, lateral to the multifidus, and find the dome of the facet joint. And I check that with either a cob or a navigation dilator. I'll take that. Navigation dilator, sorry. This is a little deep, and I think it's right there. So I either use the right lower hand image, which is the lateral x-ray, or I can cheat and use 3D CT, and I can tell that's a facet joint. I will strip all the tendons off of it now. All right, so I feel the facet joint, the top of it. I'm going to bring this small cob that's somewhat sharp down to the top of it. And I can still feel the facet joint. I'm just basically going back and forth, just releasing the multifidus tendon. Sometimes it'll bleed a lot, but if you just pack this with a Raytec for 5 minutes or less, 2 minutes, it will completely stop bleeding. So now I can get all the way around the facet joint. That's called the San Francisco Twirl. You need to be able to do that. As you do that, you need to be able to feel the lamina with the pulp of your finger and the rise of the spinous process with your tip of your fingernail. It's like, oh yeah, that feels so good. That's exactly what I feel. One other key point is that she has a huge facet joint, can have the blunt nose lexels. And if I don't take down the cap and make it flush with the lamina, the retractor will sit propped way dorsal, and you'll have a ton of soft tissue creep of the muscle. So I just reach in here, and by palpation, I will morcellize the cap of the overgrown facet joint. I don't pull anything out. I just morcellize it, because otherwise it will start to bleed like stink. All right, so I made the incision. I've released all the tendons for the, of the multifidus muscle, and I've taken down any bony overgrowth, or I call the facet joint cap that grows over, so it's more flat to the lamina. If you do that, then you don't need to do a dilation. You just need to displace the soft tissues. So I can use even a single-step dilator. I'm going to rest it over the facet joint. I'll take the retractor. So hopefully there will be very little muscle underneath, and because the cap of the facet joint arthropathy has been taken down, this is hopefully sitting flat on the surgical target site. And I would simply just use the lateral x-ray, if you don't have navigation, to rest this retractor on the top of the dome of the facet joint. That's how I know where I am with just the lateral x-ray. Then I just aim immediately using the force to see how much angulation, and then once I look down there, I'll be able to fine-tune the angulation and optimize the surgical corridor. Lock that down. I've got the retractor down, and I'm looking down the surgical corridor. There's always a little bit of muscle still there. I finished clearing that off using the cutting mode of the Bovie whenever I can. And I'm using the space between the blades to do that. And then the little bit of muscle that's there, along with the facet joint capsule, I remove with a blunt-nosed pituitary that we call the silverback, because it's a big silverback gorilla-looking thing. But the point being, I have the retractor down on bone, and there's not a lot of muscle that I'm removing. I'm already down on the lamina. And now I can start the surgery, and I can see the surgical target site without difficulty.